We're talking about empathy tonight. And I'm Hali, Roderick, and Stephanie Hamby, my podcast co-host. We're here covering for Luke and Alana tonight because they're traveling. So, Stephanie, do you want to start us off by kind of maybe defining empathy?
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of hard to put like a definition to empathy. Although there's so many out there, I haven't yet found one that I just like, yep, that's it. I love that you mentioned that it's a learned skill. So oftentimes what we see, or maybe even what people think about empathy is it's something that we are like born with. It's like innate. If we don't have it, we can't develop it. And so what we know to be true is that it is a learned skill. And that's so neat, I think, because it gives us something to look forward to in healing and recovery as something we can just add to our toolkit. So how I would define empathy, so you can add on to this, Hallie. It's very much perspective taking and really like staying out of judgment, coming in and supporting someone else. And one of the things that I think is huge with empathy is that it doesn't have to be an understanding of someone's experience, but that you can come in and support them and stand underneath them. So we use this analogy of like, can you come in and stand with someone and stand under them versus this complete understanding? Because even if you have coming in with empathy for someone else and you have a very similar situation, you still can't completely understand their experience. So this is a standing underneath and a perspective taking. Can I come in the space with you and just be there to support you? So that's kind of like my definition of empathy, although it includes so many really neat skills I think that we can learn.
Yeah, I appreciate that definition. And I think it's important for us to maybe talk about why empathy is such a big deal in relational recovery after there's been betrayal. And I also want to just validate that it's not, if it doesn't come natural to you, it's a challenge, but it's definitely something that can be developed. And I think one of the first things that we have to do when we're trying to develop empathy is to manage what comes up for us when we notice someone else in pain, especially if you've been the one that has caused the pain. So if you're married to a betrayed partner and your infidelity or sexual misbehaviors have caused their pain, oftentimes when you see your spouse in pain, it can cause you to have an emotional reaction. And then you're in your own level of pain, and it's hard to show up for your spouse in that. And so one of the first things that I liked, especially in my Help Her Heal class, but this applies for both genders, whether the betrayed partner is the husband or the wife. So for the one who has done the betraying, it's important to work on some shame resiliency. And in our training with Carol Jurgensen Sheets, she has what she calls the 7 principles of dealing with conflict, or the 7 principles of shame. She kind of, those two definitions are kind of interchangeable, and they kind of all say the same thing. If I can, I'll share my screen and just let you get a view of these. If you're in my Help Her Heal class, or if you take my Help Her Heal class, you'll see these. Or even if you work with Stephanie or I, and we follow along some of the model of Carol's Urkham, these will be familiar to you, but they kind of talk about the same thing in a different way. So if you are the one who's working to rebuild trust and create safety, as I read through these real quickly, I want you to just see if there's any of them that connect with you or that you can relate to, or they feel right to you. And then I would encourage you to internalize them. Maybe memorize it, write it down, think about it. So let me just read these real quick. When you experience conflict, ask yourself, how has my past contributed to the present day conflict? Recognize that 90% of the conflict is about your past and not who you are today. Number 2, hold yourself accountable for causing the pain while not going into shame mode. Number 3, know that although her pain is a direct response to your past actions, it's not in response to who you are today. Number 4, recognize that you're strong enough to be a container for her pain. You can help her work through her own trauma and move beyond it while working on your own solid recovery. Number 5, tell yourself the issue is not about you, but about a trauma response from your acting out in the past. Practice saying, this is not who I am today. This is about the consequences of my past actions. Know that your addiction was your kryptonite and your recovery is your superpower. Number 7, tell yourself, I won't give my past guilt and shame the power to make me feel whatever it is you're feeling in that moment. Sad, shameful, inadequate, unworthy, angry. And if you notice those, the overarching theme is that this situation that you're in is about behaviors and not who you are as a person. And that shame resiliency is so critical, because if you're stuck in shame, the difference between shame and guilt is shame is like taking on ownership of I'm a bad person. Whereas guilt can say, you know what, I did something that caused my spouse pain, and I'm going to be here to help them through that, which is the first step to empathy. If you can't manage the shame that comes up for you when you see your spouse in pain, it will be a really hard thing for you to step into that space of empathy, because you won't be able to see past what's coming up for you. My dog keeps coming in here, opening my door. So I'll walk around. Stephanie, what would you add to that?
Yeah. Yes. And so another thing with the shame piece, it often comes up for the one who has acted out. And I always say shame is the barrier to connection, and empathy is the antidote to shame. So when we have shame come up in a conversation or trying to connect with someone else, it's causing this barrier. Like, I can't connect with you because there's something stopping me. And that's the shame lies that come up. And so yes, empathy is that piece that we need to come through, and it's the antidote there to give us what we need to overcome that shame. A couple of things I wanted to add with that you touched on was the co-regulation, being regulated ourselves. And so a really huge part of that co-regulation, like when we come into connection with someone else with empathy, is being able to regulate ourselves. We have to know ourselves, know what's coming up. And a lot of that work is done with each individual. So this is a part of your individual recovery work and healing, is to have this self-awareness and emotional intelligence. I need to know what's coming up for me so that I can then connect to you. And that's a huge part of empathy, is, can I recognize, oh, I see my partner is angry right now. I remember being angry. I've been angry like this before. Can I connect around this? And so we have to know ourselves to be able to have that empathy and connect. So the prep work for empathy is to know yourself, learn self-awareness and mindfulness and all those really fun skills and tools that you learn in recovery.
Yeah, you said a word that I think is a mystery to some people, and I think you used the word or the term emotional intelligence or emotional. I think you used emotional intelligence, and
yeah,
that is, we typically see that it's more challenging for men to be aware of their emotions. That's not always the case. It's not always true. Some women have a hard time with that too. But a lot of times men have a harder time connecting with their emotions, which I also think is a skill. You can develop it, and it can be really helpful to have a coach or a therapist who can help you around developing some self-awareness with that, so that you can then, if we can't connect with ourselves, we're going to have a hard time connecting with someone else. And so if that word emotional intelligence or emotional awareness feels like a mystery to you, in my Help Her Heal class, I see most of the men having to work really hard to do it. And some men are like, it's a mystery to them. It's like, I don't even know what you're talking about. What do you mean? And so we have to kind of back up and learn some emotional awareness skills, and the more you become aware of what you're feeling and your emotions, and being able to define them and give language to it, and notice where it shows up in your body and how your behaviors correlate with what you're feeling, then that's where emotional intelligence is developed, in the emotional awareness and that work. And so it's like I said, it's not like across the board that every man has a hard time. And I have female clients, and actually for myself, it's been a journey of learning emotional intelligence, because this is what I find is common a lot of times, is that women tend to have all of the emotional boxes open all at once. And so it's a different type of confusion, because we feel a lot of intense emotions, and men sometimes don't recognize them. And so we have like the opposite going on a lot of times. It's not 100% across the board, but that's oftentimes what happens, is the women have it all open all the time, and the men are like, what are you talking about? So it makes sense that there's this disconnect, and how can we meet in the middle? So if we are feeling all the emotions all the time, can we learn to regulate them so that we can also show up from a value-based place? And if we don't even know what our emotions are, can we develop that to be able to show up with some awareness and empathy for our partner?
I don't want to get too off topic, Hallie, but I just had a thought whenever you were talking about that, about our three brains. So we function out of the logic brain, like our rational brain, our emotional brain, and then the gut, like the intuition. And what we see a lot, and this, I would say, even outside of relational repair or partner betrayal, trauma healing, or addiction recovery, just overall, people tend to have one brain that they're leading with. So like, say it's logic. And if we look at it like a 3-leg stool, if we only have one leg that we're sitting on, the stool's going to fall. And so we are learning to develop a part of that self-awareness is, can we develop in all those areas, the logic brain, the emotional brain, and then the gut, the intuition. And another thing that like really in relation to that is that self-compassion piece. So we have to have empathy for someone else. We have to have that self-compassion. When we start looking at those 3 areas, then we can have more compassion for ourselves, especially partners, being able to recognize, yes, my intuition was right. My intuition was right in the past. How can I see it show up now in my present, and then also help guide in the future, along with the emotional piece there. So yeah.
Yeah, that's such a great analogy with the 3-legged stool, and needing to develop all 3 of those brains that we function from. As you were talking, I had another thought and it left me, so maybe it will come back to me. Yeah, it left me. Okay. So if any of you know Brene Brown, she is like the queen of shame. My thought had something to do around shame. Oh, it was the self-compassion. Let me go back to this before I forget it. It came to me. So you're talking about partners having self-compassion. And that's a ton of the work that we do with our betrayed partners, is helping them develop that self-compassion. And the shame resiliency work is self-compassion work for the partner who has acted out, in my opinion. Because one thing that we find common in betrayal trauma and relational repair is that the betrayed partner is really not able to have empathy for the person who has done the betraying, at least at the beginning. It's a skill, or it's something that develops in them usually farther down the road of healing, when there's been more safety and trust created. But when they're in the fresh trauma of everything, their brain is basically looking for survival of safety and security. And so their ability to have any sort of empathy for pain that a person who has done the betraying has is pretty much not. Most of the time, there are occasions where it happens, but most of the time their ability to have empathy is pretty diminished. And so that's why I love this shame resiliency work, and just those 7 principles of shame that I shared earlier are part of that. That's having some self-compassion for yourself of going, okay, this is not because I'm such a loser or a piece of crap, or I'm, I am worthless. It's because I made some choices that caused deep pain in my relationship and for my spouse. And so this is about my choices and not about me as a person. And so if the person who has done the betraying can develop that self-compassion for themselves, that will be critical for them to be able to show up when their wife is in a lot of pain and saying things that feel critical or that feel attacking. If they can go to that place of like self-compassion and knowing where their worth comes from, that will help them to stay in a place where they can show up with empathy. But if the shame monster rears its head, it's usually going to come out in defense. It's going to come out in blame shifting. It's going to come out in maybe dropping into victim mode of like, yeah, I know I'm such a loser. I did this. It's going to come out in those unhealthy behaviors. And that is the opposite of empathy. And I tell my guys in my group that it's like throwing fuel on the fire that will like light the fire of a betrayed partner like that. If you drop into that shame mode or victim mode. So it's really important to develop that skill and work on that shame resiliency so that you can show up from a space of even having the ability to have empathy for their pain.
I know we're going to show the video. I'm going to add one thing to what you just said. The safety piece, the one who has acted out coming in with empathy when their partner is experiencing triggers, or just to be there as a support system through their healing, like with your group that you do help her heal, that is a way of creating safety. So as, like you said, the partner, the thing that has to happen for her to be able to, or whoever the partner is, to be able to then give empathy, she has to have safety and stabilization. So the one who has acted out coming in with that empathy, that provides that safety. And I just wanted to add that because I think it's so important that empathy is safety.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. Okay. I was starting to go down the Brene Brown avenue. We're going to go there for a minute. Brene Brown is like, she's like the queen of shame in my mind. She's researched shame in her career. If you have never read anything from Brene Brown, read from Brene Brown. She has lots of good stuff. I'll drop this into the chat, Sarah, so you don't have to go digging for it, but we're going to watch this short video. You may have seen it. This is a video from Brene Brown talking about empathy, and there's so many good points here. So as you're listening to this, I would encourage you to listen to what there's a nursing professor that she talks about, and she describes a few key parts of empathy. And so as you listen to that, listen for those key parts of empathy that she talks about. Hold on, I got to change my settings. There we go.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no. You want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with "at least." Yeah. And we do it all the time, because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, "I don't even know what to say right now. I'm just so glad you told me." Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
Okay, I love that last phrase. So many good things. Every time I watch that, I'm taking notes of little nuggets, but rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection. And usually when we're responding to someone, like in this particular situation with our spouse's pain, where we tend to respond with a solution or a defense or a redirect. And those are usually not going to be a helpful response, but a connected response where we're creating safety. And when I say safety, yes, I mean physical safety as well. I mean, if you're in a situation where you don't even have physical safety, we need to have a different conversation about the level of safety that you have. I'm talking about emotional safety, psychological safety, the ability to express emotions without things getting elevated. So, thinking of how you respond. Does that link not go in there? Can you drop the link? Hopefully that link worked. But a couple other things that stand out to me in the video is empathy is perspective taking. So trying to see the other person's perspective. It's also, this is one of the most important things I think, is staying out of judgment. And this is hard because in a situation where there's betrayal trauma and you're trying to heal the relationship, you may not be able to see the other person's, you may not understand the other person's perspective, which doesn't mean that it isn't their reality. So if you don't understand why they're so hurt, or you don't understand why they're hurting in this way, it doesn't change their reality of the experience that they're having. So staying out of judgment about what they're expressing or the pain that they're in is really important in this. And then recognizing the emotion in your spouse, and then being able to communicate it in a healthy way.
Hali, I was just thinking about another part of that you were mentioning about, like, how we come in and want to fix or distract or avoid, or maybe we are the helper, and so, like, let me take away this strong emotion for you, and so you don't have to sit in it. And empathy is the opposite. It says, I'm just here with you, like, you're not alone in this, and I'm here with you in this. I'm like you, I completely lost my train of thought. I just had something really good where I was going with that. It was It was on the perspective taking. Yes. On the, have I shared the analogy of the glasses, like putting on the glasses of someone
Go for it.
else?
I think that's good. I
So,
think you shared it tonight.
yes. So I use this analogy of like perspective taking, and like I see the world from my blue lens glasses, and maybe Hallie sees hers through the pink lens. And so when I'm coming in with empathy, I am taking off my blue lens glasses, and I'm going to sit with her with her pink lens glasses and hear her perspective. So I'm just coming into the space with her, wearing her perspective and sitting with her in it. And yes, this is where I was going. Another part of that, if you are like the fixer, like I need to fix this, I need to do something other than just sit here, is active listening. So this is what I'm hearing you say. Is this correct? And doing some like reflective listening. And this is a way that you can get to know your partner better, and whoever you're coming in with empathy with, but you have reflective questions that help promote their brain to think and maybe to dig deeper into this awareness. So that's really helpful for my fixers, or the ones that like, I need to do something other than just sit here. Just summarize and be there to support them.
Yeah, which I think is a common thing. One or the other partner likes to be the fixer often is what I see when I'm working with couples, like one of them is the fixer. And this, I wish, actually, I think we all in this realm of the world wish there was like something that the person who has done the betraying could do to fix the pain. And there are a lot of things you can do to help create safety and rebuild trust. And you can't heal her pain, that or his pain. That is, even though it's not your fault that you're in this pain, it is your responsibility to do the work to heal it. And as you develop empathy for that, you will be able to hold him or her in their pain. And that is an act of empathy, of instead of going in to fix it, going into, I see that you're in a lot of pain. Tell me about that. What's going on for you? Help me understand. Um, I'm just noticing in the chat there's a comment or question. I struggle to move from the me, myself, and I to focus on her hurt and pain. How do we stop fighting for self and self-pity to focus on her? Yeah, that's a good question. My first thought, and then Stephanie, I'd love your thoughts on this too, but my first thought is, well, I would ask you, are you getting individual support? Are you in a group? Because the group settings help you to get that me, myself, and I focus from in the group setting and not from your spouse. Okay, so that's where you focus on your own healing. And you can get the empathy and you can get the encouragement from the other guys in your group. And this shame resiliency work that we're talking about, we need to do some work on our own self-worth. Where does our worth come from? Who are we at our core? What kind of a person do I want to be? What are my values? And focus a ton on your own healing there so that you can be solid and anchored in yourself when she's in pain. Because when she's in pain, if you go into the me, myself, and I, you're not being that solid anchor for her to be able to get stabilized again in her own emotions. And then you both end up swinging, and then it's never really a good thing. So, how do we stop fighting for self and self-pity to focus on her? I wouldn't, I'm maybe reading into this question a little bit. I don't want you to stop fighting for self. I actually want you to fight for that, like to fight to figure out who I am. The self-pity is shame, right? Self-pity is speaks, just oozes shame for me. Self-pity in my mind is like, I'm such a loser. I'm such a piece of crap. You can't believe I did that. That's shame. But fighting to figure out who you are at your core, and that you're not your behaviors, and what are my values, and I'm going to anchor myself into those values so that I'm not making those choices again. that are going to cause more pain. And then doing the shame work. So my first thoughts are group, and make sure you're getting individual support. You have a coach or a therapist that can help you do that work. And then as you do that, and then you work to develop, and we're going to maybe give you some shame language here in a minute, some phrases and things that are empathetic. Sometimes you just need to hear what it sounds like because you don't know what it is. So we're going to give you some examples here in a minute. But Stephanie, what are your thoughts on that question?
Yeah, I would, I just agree with what you said. The group one-to-one support, and that also allows for accountability. So it is an outlet for you to process and learn more shame resilience things. And again, the partner, it usually doesn't have, their body is already in this overwhelm, so they don't have the capacity to support that. So yes, I second that. Accountability, group support, one-to-one. Also thought about something, I call it the I wounds. So like especially when we're in conversation. So I know like the shame can feel like ever present, and I also have a different view on shame. I think it's good. It helps us to recognize um that we don't want to live in this state anymore. So I call it like the inner critic, the little guy that stands on the shoulder that's always like yapping, telling us who we are. And it's there for a reason. So if we keep hearing that, there's work that we need to do. And so it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it can help us grow. And I'll call it the I wounds. So when these I wounds start coming up and, oh, I'm turning inward, it's about me and I, incompetence, insignificance, impotence, all the I wounds that start coming up, then we can recognize there's work that I need to do around this. There's healing that needs to take place, and start digging into what it is, and do the work. That's where the individual work comes in. When we are doing our individual work, then we can show up in connection with other people. So yes, basically just what you said, Hallie. I agree with all of it.
Mm-hmm. So there's another question in the Q&A that says, my default response is victim mode. Did so today, in fact. I've always struggled finding empathy because I know I caused the problem. So how can I possibly show up during the hard conversations to add support? Just something I've been stuck on for a while. I can't stabilize her when I hurt her to start with. Just stuck, and I never know what to say. Okay, thank you for that question. I think that there's a lot of people that might relate to that and can connect with what you're saying and the frustration and the pain that comes with that. Stephanie, do you want to start with this one? Since I kind of rambled on the last one, do you want to start with this one?
Yes, I'll just give my 2 cents for what first popped in my mind. One, yes, I want to validate too. This is very common and normal. And it's kind of one of those things that I say, like, if you're not experiencing this at some point, then I would be concerned. So it's good that it's there. And the awareness, it's good that you have self-awareness around that. So my first thought was, when we move to like helplessness or this like victim mindset, what the body feels like is, I don't have agency over this situation. I have no control. So I would really like look into seeking what are areas that you do have control over. What are personal, if you have never heard that term, personal agency, you do have agency over things in your life. So moving a focus to more of like, what do you have control over versus I am completely helpless in this situation. So those were my first thoughts. But it's really similar to the first question. And there's people who can support you around this. And that's like your one-to-one provider, coach, or therapist, and your group support and mentors and accountability. And so that we are stronger whenever we come into connection with our partners. But personal agency was the first thing I thought about. Hallie, do you feel like that even aligns with that?
Yeah. So let me give you, I'm trying to think of an appropriate analogy. I'm a visual learner and I like analogies. I don't know if this is I'm not going to go with that one. Okay. But think about this. So one of those 7 principles of shame was, I can be a container for her pain while staying out of victim mode. So when you see your spouse in pain, I think we need to, if we're talking about like in the moment, what do I actually do? How can I actually start working on this? I think at first you have to start regulating your own nervous system. So if you feel activated or triggered when you see your spouse activated or triggered, can you take a couple of deep breaths? Can you take, I have this thing I do for myself. I like put my hand over my mouth and pretend that that is duct tape, just as a reminder to me that I'm not going to say anything yet until I have been able to get grounded a little bit. And so, because usually the first thing that comes to my mind is not going to be helpful. And so, if I can take a deep breath, and I would encourage you, whoever asked this question, to memorize one of those things. Okay, this is about my behaviors, not about me as a person, and I can be a container for her pain. So here's an analogy. I'm not going to take credit for it, and I won't throw my client under the bus who gave me this analogy either, but I think it was, it's kind of helpful. So if it doesn't speak to you, I'm sorry, and it's kind of gross, but I think it gives the picture a little bit. So you know when you have a child who is sick and they get up in the night and they're throwing up, and you have, usually most of us have no problem going to our child when they're sick and they're in pain and they're throwing up and bringing them a cold cloth to put on their face and bringing them a fresh drink of water and having empathy for them and saying, are you okay? What do you need right now? Do you need a drink? Do you need a cold cloth? And that's empathy, right? It's going, oh my gosh, I see that you're in pain. Let me sit here with you. Let me help you feel better. And this analogy that my client said is like, so what you're saying is I hold the bowl for her to throw up, but then I don't turn around and drink the puke. And I'm like, yes. You don't, you be the container. You allow her to get everything out that she needs to, the pain that she's in. You acknowledge that you can see that she's in pain. I think one of the biggest things that is helpful, and this takes a lot of like individual work, like this takes a lot of internal work, is the ownership of the pain. I know that my behaviors are what caused this pain. And I know that because I did that in the past, that caused this pain. And I'm so sorry that I caused this pain. And then the reassurance. And I want to reassure you that I'm here for you. And I'm here as long as it takes for you to start to feel better. So do you see the empathy language in there? I'm acknowledging, I'm noticing that she's in pain. I'm taking ownership of it. I'm saying I recognize that your pain right now is because of my behaviors and I'm so sorry. And the reassurance. That's not a fix, right? That's not a, if you just do this, we'll be out of pain. This is I'm here for you as long as it takes. And I'll do whatever. Is there something that you need from me right now? What can I do to support you? And so, might be kind of a nasty analogy, but it has been helpful for a few guys to understand that, okay, I can do that. I can be there for her when she's in pain, but I don't have to take then and own everything as my own because I'm solid in who I am. And if you're still acting out or you're not in solid recovery and she's still getting re-traumatized, then we need to back up a little bit more, right? Because your behaviors are still causing more pain. And so we can't just skip to that place if there's still re-traumatization happening. And so just check yourself if there hasn't been individual work, if you haven't been in a group, if you're what I would call white knuckling, where you're maybe not acting out in the moment, but it cycles and you don't really have the tools to help you stay out of that cycle, then we need to back up and we need to do that individual work so that we can create safety. This is one thing that I find challenging is with the relational repair. Like the pain is so great that we want to do anything we can to get out of the pain. And sometimes even my betrayed partners are like, okay, how can I trust again? I just want to trust him when there's still scary behaviors going on. And so if you want to create that safety and trust, then we need to have the scary behaviors under control. And those things are what we'll learn in your individual. Those are so personal based on what what's going on for you and your situation. But group, coach, therapist can help you figure out what you need to do to create that safety for your spouse. I kind of got off on a tangent right there, but holding her in her pain, right? Staying out of that victim mode of I'm just such a loser, but my behaviors have caused this pain, and I'm going to be here for you. I'll give you the cold cloth. I'll give you a drink of water. I'll listen to your pain. I'll hold you if you need me to. I'll give you space if you need me to, because that can be different from day to day or moment to moment. Sometimes she may want you to hold you, and sometimes she may not want to be anywhere near you. Sometimes she might need some space. So what does she need, and what can you do to show up for her in that way? Hopefully that was helpful on that question. Thanks for the tangent. Being re-traumatized, not seeking pain. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to read a little bit into that comment of being re-traumatized, not seeking pain. Yeah. If you, okay, here's one thing. If you are the person who has done the betraying, I can tell you almost without fail that every betrayed partner that I come to comes seeking to get out of pain. They do not enjoy being in that pain, and they do not want to go back and just live in the past or revisit that 100 times because it's enjoyable for them. Like, the biggest thing they want is, what can I do to get out of this pain? And so a betrayed partner, I've never met one that wants to just go back and live there to punish their spouse. I've never met one in all my years of doing this work. I've never met one. I can't say that there aren't partners that have wanted to cause pain, but they want to get out of pain themselves. And I'm not endorsing that wanting to cause pain, just so you know, I'm not endorsing that. But I'm just, if you are implying that she's seeking pain or she's trying to stay stuck in the past, I will pray for you, because that would be like lighting the fuse to the bomb. And if your behaviors are causing more pain, or she's being re-traumatized because of other behaviors or lack of empathy, then that's where we need to focus on. So I just want to throw that out there. I don't know if I'm reading correctly into that comment. Feel free to add more if you want. But I would just say that never met a partner that wants to stay stuck in the pain. Okay, so Stephanie, what do you think about, keep the questions coming if you have them, because we'd rather talk about what you guys want to talk about. But what do you think about giving some empathetic phrases? Because sometimes we just don't know what this sounds like. And so I think having some empathetic phrases can be helpful at times. Any thoughts about that? Did you have
Yeah, absolutely. A couple that come to mind just right off the top of my head is that makes sense to me. You mentioned the AVR tool. Do we have that in a graphic that we could send to them
We do.
and to the listeners? I may have it too.
I have it too.
But really, a part of empathy is acknowledging the person's experience. So acknowledging what they are saying, and then validating their emotions. So empathetic phrases look like, this makes sense to me. I can see that you are sad. I can see that you are angry, and naming and labeling the feeling. So even if they don't say, I'm really angry, if you can see that they're angry, I can see that you're really angry. And then even adding in a part of like, I can see that this is because of my past behavior. Or if the partner is triggered, I can see that this place or this thing reminds you of my past behavior or this past acting out. Other empathetic phrases, they just like completely left my mind.
I have some here. I just shared these with one of my Help Her Heal classes this week. One common thing that I hear a lot is, can't you see all the work that I've done? I'm doing all these things, or I'm not doing that anymore. You don't even recognize the work that I've done. That's not really an empathetic phrase. So, a more empathetic phrase around that idea might sound something like, I'm willing to talk about this as many times as you need to, as you need to. Is there anything else that you need to know? I'm willing to go there as many times as we need to. I can see that you're in pain. What do you need in this moment? So, let's see. Let me think.
The what you just said there on the end, what do you need? I think is really important. Betrayed partners often have a hard time labeling and naming or understanding what their own needs are. So it's good work for the partner to work for and get curious about. But for the one who has acted out, to come in and say, what do you need in this moment? Maybe she needs you to come closer. Maybe she just needs you to sit with her. Maybe she needs you to answer some questions. And so what is it that you need? Is there a way that I can support you in this?
I think that goes along with this comment that just came in. It says, I think it's important for the betrayed to think about what empathy looks like, sounds like, or feels like to her, and then communicate that. That knowing what you need and asking for it, using your voice, is hard sometimes. And it's something in this comment, and this can change over time. It's evolved for her over time. Because our understanding and our awareness and our healing evolves over time. So I appreciate that comment of just being able to ask for what we need. And if you are a partner who has had the sexual misbehaviors, if you can develop it and show up in that way without her having to ask for it, that's impactful as well. So here's another one, is something along the lines of, I can see that you're having a lot of strong emotions. Makes sense why you're having a lot of strong emotions. I'm here for you. Would you like me to listen to you, or do you need some space right now? So just instead of going, oh my gosh, you're crazy. Here we go down the crazy train again. Empathetic, makes sense why you have a lot of strong emotions. What do you need in this moment? Okay, here's a victim mode phrase that we talked about. Victim mode. Somebody talked about dropping into victim mode. This might sound something like, I don't even know why I try. It's never going to be good enough for you. A more empathetic phrase instead of something like that might sound like, I realize I'm not always getting it right, and I want you to know I'm going to continue to work on myself, and I'm working hard to rebuild trust and create safety for you. And I hope someday you're going to be able to forgive me. So instead of dropping into victim mode, showing up with a move towards with empathy instead will help you stay out of that victim mode. Okay, hopefully those phrases help you a lot. Stephanie touched on reflective listening earlier. This is one of the first things we try to help our couples develop, and I think it's a really good empathetic skill. So if you're looking for skills to practice, let's just describe reflective listening real quick. And I think one of the most important things when we are practicing developing our listening skills is checking our nonverbal communication. I have to work really hard on this because I can say a lot of things with just a look in my eyes, or with a sigh in the right way, or I'm famous apparently for rolling my eyes. It's kind of subconscious. I don't even know I do it, but apparently I do it a lot. And I can roll my eyes and send a message without even saying a word. So one of the biggest things with empathy conversations is check your body language. Can you soften your posture, especially if you're the husband? Because a lot of times you're bigger, stronger. Can you soften your posture? Can you soften your eyes? Can you soften your voice? Tone of voice. Tone of voice, guys, tone of voice. Because tone of voice can, like, I can say that same phrase that I said just a minute ago. The way I said it, I realize I'm not always getting it right, and I'm going to continue to keep working on myself. Or I can say it, I know I'm not ever getting it right, but I'm going to keep working on myself, and I hope someday that's going to be enough for you to trust me again. Tone of voice, right? Totally different message. Said similar words, but you get a totally different message based on your tone of voice. So tone of voice, soften your body language, and then as you're listening to your partner, you're repeating what they said. So what I heard you say is, and did I miss anything? And you're really just seeking to understand and seeking to listen. That's a really good empathy developing skill. And you can go back and forth with each other. And both of you work to develop the empathy. So also eye contact and looking at each other. If you're gentle touch, if it's okay. But there's a few, I wanted you guys to walk away with some practical things and some language so that you can go home and hopefully start to practice or go back to your real life. I know you're all probably at home. Anything else you want to add, Stephanie? Because I know we're running out of time and probably need to wrap it up here in a minute.
No, that's really good. I'm glad you touched on the nonverbals. You know, even our body language, like crossed arms, like, am I sitting here with an open body to be able to receive what you're saying? So sometimes just cross arms or cross legs, or I'm closed off to the situation. So just having an open response in your body language is huge. We read the mind, the brain reads the whole body. So it's the nonverbals, the language, the tone of voice, all the things. So yes, I'm glad you touched on that. With the active listening or the reflective listening, it is literally just sitting with the person. What I'm hearing you say is, did I get this correct? Is there anything I missed? And just listening to learn. You're listening to gain perspective.
Okay, as you can tell, Stephanie, I could probably talk about this all night long. I am going to give you a link. I should have mentioned this earlier, Sarah, so you could go jump in and get it. Hopefully I can find it. Oh, I already did. So we did an episode number 17 with Carol Jurgensen Sheets in our podcast where we talked about empathy. And she's the developer of the Early Recovery Couples Empathy Model and the Help Her Heal course. And so she has a lot of good things to say about empathy. So if you're looking for a deeper dive into this, you can check out our podcast episode with Carol. We just want to plug the things that we have going on. If you are looking for support, I'll just kind of tell them what I have going on, Stephanie, and then you can do the same. Check out our podcast. We've got lots of good episodes. There's lots of links in our show notes of our podcast. The Help Her Heal class, I'll start a new round at the beginning of the year. At Choose Recovery, we have support groups for betrayed partners and the ones who are working on their sexual self-mastery. And at the beginning of the year, I'm working on a class for children of families where there's been betrayal. So we're going to have a class. My daughter's actually going to co-lead it with me. And we've walked this journey. And so she's in school to become a therapist. Her and I are going to lead that group together. She's an adult, so we're going to have an adult children's group and then a teenage children's group for kids. It seems like there's a lot of people asking for that, not a lot of great resources out there. So I'm excited about that. We have a men's betrayal trauma group that I lead. So if you're a husband who is a betrayed partner, please come join our group. It's good to be in community with other men. So Stephanie, what have you got going on?
Yeah, so the Healing Hearts, and I should have mentioned this in the beginning. We are a few weeks in now, maybe 6, I think. You can join at any time. It's workbook, lots of learning, education on all the things that Hali and I just talked about, and relational repair. How do we come in together and bring our individual recovery and healing in as a couple, potentially moving towards relational repair, or those choosing to stay. So you can join at any time, or you can get on the wait list. I think next week we actually are covering empathy. So it kind of falls at a really good time. Yeah. that's all I have going on right now that would be supportive for couples in this.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Hali and Stephanie, for joining us tonight. It was so great to get to know you better and to learn from you. I think we all benefited greatly from what you taught us here. So thank you so much for your time. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. It was great to have you. And be sure to join us again next month, the last Sunday of the month. We always do these Road to Recoveries, and it'll be Luke and Alana, I believe, next month. So we will see you then. And thanks so much for joining.
Can I add one more thing?
Yes.
On the second Sunday of every month, I also do a webinar called Choosing to Stay After Infidelity and Betrayal. It's free as well, kind of a similar format. So if anybody wants to jump into that one, it's kind of similar. We talk about different recovery topics, but I'd love to have you join me on that Sunday as well. So you can check out the link for that on our website. So, okay. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you. We'll see you guys.